Great. So now let's start. Okay, we're going to start with principle number 1. Everyone take out your pages. For every single principle, there is this like crazy philosophy part where I'm going to make your brain extend a little bit. Really, it's not that hard. You just have to think beyond you. Because what did I tell you? If you're not able to express a concept, it's because you do not know the concept. So if I ask you right now, does God exist? And you say yes. And you tell me, how do you know this? And you cannot say this, you do not know there's a God. Okay? And when someone comes and they have some nice stories about Yeshu, you're going to drop it. So for every single principle, there is this like philosophy part. And then there is what I like to call a bomb, which is a very important, beautiful lesson that will change your life forever. Okay? So I'm not going to tell you which one is the bomb. You'll hear it by yourself. So first we go into philosophy. Great. Principle number 1. Okay? Again, the first 5 principles speak about the nature and the greatness of God. Let's go into principle number 1. I'm going to read it in Hebrew because if you read it in English, it doesn't really have every word exactly the way that I want. Okay? It goes like this. Everyone has one. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. I believe with perfect faith. Number 1. She'abore yitbarach shemo hu bore umanchik lekol habriuim. That the Creator, blessed be His name. Very important, these 2 words, is the Creator and the conductor or the supervisor of all things created. Okay? Again, that the Creator, blessed be His name, is the Creator and the conductor or supervisor, whichever word you like more, right, of all things created. By the way, listen to a language. God is the Creator. Everything else is all things created. By the way, this is a famous Seudah Shlishit song. Not that you know any Jewish music, but we're starting a singing group now, so it goes like this. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. You know this? She'abore yitbarach shemo. And then you say, listen. Hu ro'eh umanchik nai 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 nai. Hu manchik lekol habiruim ve'hu levado asa. Hu asa ve'yaseh. Hu oseh ve'yaseh. This is how I sing with Chevy, so she's learning how to do. Okay. She's looking at me. After Rosie O'Donnell, I think we could never be friends again. She's never going to forgive me. Where is the power of Teshuvah? Okay, moving on. So then, what do you say? I believe with perfect faith that the Creator, blessed be His name, is the Creator and the conductor or supervisor of all things created. And then follow, comma, ve'hu levado. And He Himself, no one else, asa ve'oseh ve'yaseh lekol ha'ma'asim, is doing, did, and will do to all of the creations. You hear this? Let's say again. And He Himself is doing, will do, and did for all things created. Pretty much you're saying many important things. God created everything, right? Every single thing is dependent of God. Right? God is beyond past, present, and future because God is doing all of this. And everything is included in past, present, and future. And not only that, but you're saying something else. God did not just create it, He supervises, He conducts. You know, by the way, lots of philosophers believe that there is a God that created the world. But then what do they say? He checked out. This is what lots of people use in order to express the idea that there's evil in the world. It is just that God is there, but He's not in it. He checked out. Now, this principle, I'm not going to talk so much about the evilness. I will a little bit. But really, God did not check out. We're saying God conducts everything. He supervises. By the way, have you ever been to an orchestra? My sister is starting to be a conductor. What does that conductor do? Nothing. Really, I have no idea what his job is. It goes like this. And you think he's doing something? Apparently he is. The conductor has the most important job, but you think he's not doing anything. He's not involved, but he's the most involved. He's not doing anyone's job, but he's doing everyone's job. Everyone's job is dependent on him, right? This is what we're saying. Now listen to a word of the Rambam, because this is where we're going to take all of the philosophy, and I'm going to explain each one of these points, right? Turn your page around, number 7. I know this is not organized, but that's life. No patience making these source sheets. Great. This is what the Rambam says, quote. And again, I'm going to mention them all, and then I'm going to explain each one slowly, slowly, so you arrive into this point by yourself. Yesod HaYesodot ve'amud HaChochmot, right? The foundations of all foundations, and the, amud, the pillar of wisdom, right? Le'eda sheyesh sham matzui rishon, to know that there is a first existence. Did you hear the wording? There is a first existence. Why does it say a first existence? A first existence. Why does it say that? You know the typical question, who created God? How was God created? If something is called an existence, is it created? Not created. The Rambam uses its words carefully. God is not created. God is also not even called a creator, even though he is called a creator. God is first called an existence. It's not dependent. It was, it has been, it is, everything. And then he continues, Vehu mamtzi lekol hanimtza, and he makes exist everything that exists. Vekol hanimtzaim min hashamayim ve'aretz u'ma benechem, and everything that is in heaven and earth and in between them. Lo nimtzau ela ma'amitat himatzu. They do not exist, but rather because of the truth of his existence. You hear this? Again, I'm going to go into everything. And he created, and he brings existence. It's also a different wording. If I say someone creates something, right? I might say someone created something and now that thing exists. Like if I make a puzzle, yes? I created this puzzle. Now this puzzle exists without me. Yes? Does that make sense? But that's not the wording of the Rambam. The Rambam is wise. What does he say? The Rambam says, and his existence causes everything to exist. When I'm causing something to exist, that automatically makes it that everything that exists on my cause is dependent on my existence, yes? It's also dependent on my choice to make it exist. Because if not, it could just not exist at any moment, right? And then he says, bet. Everyone there where the bet is with the little brackets business? And if it will even go into your mind that he is not existed, God, there's nothing else that could exist. Because if everything is dependent on the existence of God, if God would not exist for one moment, then what would happen to everything else? Poof, right? Like Cinderella and the little, Alakazul, la Minchikapu, la Bibidi Babidi Boo, I don't know her name. Okay? Do you like her? Great. Okay? That if all of the things without him wouldn't exist, he will still exist, and he will not be cancelled because everything else is cancelled. Okay, let's just go into it. This is the philosophy. There is a God. How do we know there must be a God, right? First, let's go into zero. What does the Rambam say? The number one foundation in life is that there is something that was. There is an existence, right? By the way, you could arrive this logically on any way that you want. This is very easy. I'm not going to go into a whole science Big Bang. I'm going to do it later. But if you ever think about this, people always ask, but what was there first? What was there first? What was there first? Question. If you ask this question, would you never get to an answer that it's complete? Yes, because what was there first? This. But then what was there before that? This. What was there before that? This. So you would be obligated to say that there must have been something that was there before everything else that did not depend on anything else. Does that make sense? Yes. Because if you're saying something came after something or something came after something, then you'll never reach a point where something didn't come after something. And therefore that would be a problem. Because that means that every single thing needs to be created, but then how did the first thing come into existence? So the Rambam says no. The first thing always existed. By the way, if you remember like science, you remember how you have these things like categories, subcategories, whatever you want, the genealogy tree. You know what I'm talking about, right? These two come out of this. 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 You always need to reach a point that there was something that was, by definition, logically, and it gave birth to everything else. You'll always need to reach this point. There's always something that had to come before, right? That's an obvious thing. It's like there was a famous question. Who was there before? The chicken or the egg? Now that's a trick question. Can the chicken come without the egg? No. Can the egg come without the chicken? No. And therefore, it must have been that there was something that made the chicken and the egg. By the way, if you ever notice this, which is amazing, science nowadays is able to do anything. It's able to treatment in order to create babies. It's able to do this. It's able to do that. But it's never able to do it out of nothing. You ever notice that? The atom, whatever you call it, cannot create an atom. You always need a prime material. You always need the smallest particle, at least, right? It's also not able to give something out of nothing. Let's say you give eyesight, right? Science is not able to give you eyesight out of nowhere. Only if once you had it and then you lost it, or give you glasses in order to improve it, but it cannot create the power of eyesight. Is that true? Maybe one day they will. But as of now, they haven't. Because who was there, the chicken and the egg? It had to be that there was someone that made either the chicken or the egg. Because each one is dependent on the other one in order to be able to exist. So now, right, this is what we call, very important. If you would say for one moment that God doesn't exist, then everything else would cease to exist. You know what this makes it, and this is really important for when I'm going to throw at you the bomb, so pay very well attention to his detailed explanation, because when I'm throwing at you the bomb, you go crazy, but you need to understand this. If everything exists depending on God, that means that by definition, only God's existence is absolute, and everything else's in the world existence is relative. You heard that? Now, what is the difference between absolute and relative? Relative is not. Relative is not a fact. Relative, it's pretty much the same as an illusion or something that you think it is there, but it's not really there. I'm going to go into it much later when I get to my bomb, right? God is absolute. It is what it is. There's no other way of looking at it. There's no other way of understanding it. Relative is dependent on the one who sees. You understand? Relative is dependent on the one who's learning. And therefore, being that it is dependent, it could be huge. It could be a way you perceive it, and it could also not, right? By the way, hold this in mind. Everything in the world is relative. You see it, but the way that you see it is because you see it that way, but it's not really that way. You understand? We're going to go into it later, right? But God's existence is absolute and obligatory. Therefore, that means that whatever God is the only thing that is in the world. You heard what I just said? Whatever God is the only thing it is in the world. That's how you should really use your terms. Because the only thing that's real is God. Everything else is relative. And therefore, when you think about your life, and I'm going to show how this works later, if you really want to own your life, if you really want to do what is right, you have to go in the terms of God. Because those terms are absolute. That's really what is. Everything else is not. So now, if you would say for one moment, right, that God does not exist, everything else in the world would cease to exist. Yes? But if you would say for one moment that everything else doesn't exist, then God still exists. Right? You know what also makes it? That's huge. If you would say for one moment that God ceased to exist, nothing could exist. Therefore, that means that everything that does exist doesn't really exist. It just exists because God exists. But you know what it also says? God can make exist whatever he wants. And therefore, whatever you see as existence is not really in existence. Because God is making it exist. And therefore, God can make it exist in any other way. Because if something really exists, it cannot cease to be what it is. You hear what I just said? If something really is, it cannot cease to be what it is. Yes? But if you would say that if God would stop existing, everything else would stop to exist also, then it is that whatever does exist does not really exist. Yeah? Does that make sense? Some will teach you all philosophy. You heard what I just said? Because we're going to go into it. It's deep, but I'm just making you think. Again, if something exists and is, can it change itself? It is. This is just the way it is. I love you, babe. I have no idea why this song came in. Okay? But I love you, right? That just is, right? But if what is dependent on something else, that means that what you think is not. Because it could change at any moment. And therefore, it's not it. It could be anything. It's like if being chubby doesn't exist, then I could be not chubby. So chubby is not non-existent. You understand? I'm going to take this into much, much greater depth. But pretty much this is the way it works. And therefore, let's go back. If you would think that God doesn't exist, then nothing else could exist. But if nothing else exists, God would still exist. That means, again, that the only terms that are real are the terms of God. And therefore, everything else is dependent. And if you could go on God's terms, then you guarantee eternity and you guarantee reality. Everything else is not really a reality. It's like a reality TV show. You think it's real and you cried when Chuck and Blair were over, but they were not real. You just cried for nothing. You understand? Zelo kara. And by the way, and the Rambam says, and the understanding of this point is understanding the first commandment of the Torah. The first commandment of the Torah says, I am the Lord your God. We always ask this question. We did this in Mechina. Is that a commandment or a statement? Statement, I am the Lord your God. No, it's a commandment. Get to understand whatever God is. That's a commandment from the Torah. Because the more that you could understand God, the more that He's your God. You understand? But if I don't understand the faculties of God, then He's not the God. You understand? He could be someone else, or, He's not someone else, but you're perceiving someone else, right? And this is why this is the first commandment of the Torah. Beautiful. So let's start from zero. Everyone got all of this philosophy? Let's say it one more time. It is important to know that there was an existence that always was, and that existence brought everything else into existence. That means that every single existence is dependent on the existence because it's not something that's created and then there it is. That means that if the first existence would cease to exist, everything else would also cease to exist, right? But if everything else ceased to exist, that wouldn't affect in one tiny bit the first existence because that gives to everything else and doesn't receive from anything else. By the way, this is how Abraham got into a conclusion that there must be a God, which I'm not going to teach this to you right now. But if you came to Mechina, you know this. These people will teach you. If not, apparently it's on YouTube. 900 views.